Hey guys, what's up? My name is Chloe and I'm a private pilot, and this is my little co-pilot, Poppy Chulo. And today we want to talk about what the most challenging part was for me earning my private pilot license. Now I'm doing this video because it is nearly 1 year since I took my private pilot check ride. So at this point I have 1 year of flying under my belt as a licensed pilot, flying for fun, flying for my instrument rating, and with hindsight, I now see that my biggest challenge is probably not what you may think. Now, people's major hurdles are time, money, energy. Being in deficit of those three things to various degrees are that's everybody's struggle. No matter what rating or license you're going for, that's going to be something. But when I think about me personally and my private pilot training, I see now how the biggest hurdle I had to overcome was separating fact from fiction about aviation, a myth from reality. I'll tell you what I mean. So I came to aviation with no aviation background whatsoever. I did not grow up in the hangars or nothing like that. I am a native New Yorker from Manhattan. I bought my first car when I was in my early to mid 30s, came to aviation in my early to mid 30s. So I was taking the subway most of my life. When it came to transportation, it was the subway. And so, I had ideas about aviation from the culture, from movies, from the news, from just what people think about pilots and flying and what it must take to be a pilot, and how smart you must have to be a pilot, and just ideas from culture. And so it took a really long time. It took a really long time for me to figure out through experience what the reality was of aviation versus what I thought it was. And I have written down here a couple of my strange ideas that I carried into my private pilot training that I needed to learn through experience were absurd, bizarre, or just simply not true. And these ideas were all holding me back to various extents. The first one, first of all, I will say that I chose the Piper Warrior because it just looked cooler than the Cessna, straight up. I was like, okay, that looks like a plane. The other one looked like a toy to me, so I was just going based on that. The plane looks cooler, but, and it still does to me, honestly. But, I honestly thought that the Piper would take off like an F-15. I thought it would just shoot up vertically into the sky. Yep, that is what I really thought. And I thought that rotation speed was going to be like 200 miles an hour. Didn't even think in terms of knots back then, only miles an hour. So it didn't occur to me that like a butterfly can get airborne just a couple of knots or just a couple of miles an hour. No, in order to get airborne, you need some speed. So that's where we were starting. And in that same vein, I will say that I actually thought that you gain airspeed when you pitch up. Because imagine in my mind, like the Piper's shooting up like this, it must be gaining, as it's accelerating upward, it must be gaining a ton of airspeed. Yeah. It took about 20 hours for that one to plop out of my head. And it's crazy because I started my training with a lot of the written material already studied and done, and most of the ground school course done. But it took experience to undo some of these wacky ideas I had. I'm telling you. That is the same, by the way, for instrument. I studied and studied and studied. I did really well on both the private and instrument. I got 97 on both of those written exams. But I'm telling you, there is nothing like experience. Like even like shooting these approaches and stuff, the charts make absolutely more sense to me now. Even though I had understood them intellectually, I have internalized their meaning now that I'm shooting approaches. So anyways, Yeah, but it took about 20 hours. I still remember when it like clicked. I was walking him and I'm like, gaining airspeed as you pitch down, losing it as you pitch up. Oh, because the wind separates from the wing. Like I remember when it clicked, I'm like, oh, yeah, it took a while. So okay, but that's not, those aren't even like the worst of the beliefs I had. So I've written down the 3 main cuisine strangest beliefs that held me back the longest, the most. The first one I have here is that I thought the plane could just like fall out of the sky. So in just the same way I thought the plane would take off vertically, I thought it could just drop like a rock out of the sky. And it's crazy because I didn't even realize I was thinking that. My instructor had just like looked at me one day. We were flying to St. Simon's Island from St. Augustine. He's like, the plane can't just fall out of the sky. I'm like, oh. And something like lit up in the back of my head. I'm like, okay. Because I definitely had been thinking that without ever having articulated it, even to myself. Because he said that and I'm like, I felt a sense of relief immediately. He's like, yeah, it's aerodynamic. It'll, even if the engine quits, we'll glide, altitude, depending on how much altitude we have beneath us, we'll glide. We should be fine. Anyway, yeah, the plane will not just drop out of the sky. If the wings fell off and we ceased to even be an aircraft and we were just a fuselage, but barring these crazy things, the plane will not just drop out of the sky like a brick. So that was I'm really glad he told me that when he told me that, by the way, because I had my first student solo cross country very soon thereafter, and it was a very peaceful ride for me because that idea was gone. So that was good. Another crazy idea I had was that if you stalled the plane, it was over. You were cooked. You were done. There's no coming back from a stall. So imagine how terrified I was when I learned that we had to induce stalls and learn how to recover from stalls. And I mean, the idea of this was just like I'm like, how will I ever learn that? How can one ever learn that? Is there even time to, like, let's say, unstall after you've stalled? Like, I truly thought that if you stalled, you were screwed. It was over. So I'll never forget that first lesson with stalls. It was a little northwest of the airport, and I was scared. I screamed. I believe I cried. It was bad. My instructor was just like, oh my God. He later told me, he's like, that flight made me wonder. I'm like, wow, what will it take for her to get comfortable doing this? I'm very lucky to have had him. He was very patient, and I still get to get his instruction now as an instrument student, like at least for a little while. I'm really grateful for that because he's such a good instructor. But yeah, I really thought that. Sorry, dude. I know that was a bad flight. A lot of tears. And then the other crazy thought I had was that there is no margin of error in flying. There is 0 margin of error. Now, you have to be meticulous. You can never be complacent, and you have to do everything. You have to do everything correctly. But I did not think there was any margin for error with that. So in other words, if I were to do a climb checklist at 1,200 feet instead of 1,000, that's it. Screwed. Done. It's over. Messed it up. If it was 5 minutes into cruise flight and I hadn't done a cruise checklist yet, screwed up. We're screwed. We're cooked. I've already planted the seeds of disaster into the flight, and it's all my fault. And just insane levels of. But I didn't think it was. I thought it was sane. I thought it made sense. So imagine I was thinking this way. So I was just so intense a lot of the time, and I think I lost my humor at some point along the way too. It was really, really miserable to just be in my own head sometimes during that entire epoch of my training, because I just did not think that there was any margin for error at all. Yeah. And then in the mix of that, I had this terrible habit I developed. Never do this, by the way. Ever do. I don't care where you are and you're flying. Never do the following thing. Never tell yourself you suck at flying. I would get this idea in my head. Like if I didn't do the climb checklist at 1,000 feet, it was like 1,100. I would get this idea in my head. I'm a shitty pilot. I suck. And it would just keep going. And I would always still do everything and fly well and, have a safe flight, a safe landing. But it was miserable because I was constantly like, once that thought started that I was a terrible pilot and I sucked and I was bad at flying, it would not stop. And it would go on and on. And it would just get bigger and worse and worse and worse. Some of my worst flights were when it had just gotten to this point where I'm like, I'll never be able to do this on my own without my instructor. Like I'll never be a licensed pilot because I suck. That was just the worst thing I used to ever think. I won't say I don't ever think that anymore. There's like old artifacts in my head that can get lit up or activated a little bit, like little sparks of light sometimes where I'm like, oh, I suck. I could kind of hear it. I'm like, shut up. You don't know what the hell you're talking about, old voice. And it's gone, it's done. But yeah, that was bad. One way that I was able to overcome that was that I would tell myself after we landed, when I was driving home, and then, days between lessons, I was like, instead of thinking I suck, instead of like using one moment to justify like, okay, you see I suck because of this and that reason, why don't you use those moments to think, okay, I can improve this or do better next time, and look forward instead of this like hardened negative perspective. And when I started to use my mistakes or not just like little like forgetful moments as propulsion to move forward, that's when I started moving forward as a pilot and just having more pleasant experiences flying. Because you imagine it was not fun to be me for a long time when I was doing my private pilot training. One of the last flights before my private pilot check ride with my instructor, I think I said to him, it was a really nice flight. We were coming back from Palatka. I think it was Palatka. And I said, I feel pretty good about things. And he was like, nice, that's really nice. It was just like a general sense of like, I think I could do this. It was good, but yeah, it took a while. Anyway, guys, I've been talking for too long. Papi Chulo's tired. And tell me, licensed pilots, what ideas can you remember that maybe you had when you were doing your private pilot training that seem wacky to you now? And if you are earning your private pilot currently, does any of this resonate with you? Can you relate to any of this? Let us know in the comments below. And Papi and I will talk to you very soon. Okay, bye guys. Bye.